Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're going to be exploring something incredible, neuroplasticity, especially in those really crucial early years of childhood development.
Oh yeah, it's really fascinating how our brains, can change and adapt based on what we experience. And it's never too early to start thinking about this stuff, honestly.
Right. It's amazing. And we've got two articles to dive into today. One is from an international school in Indonesia, and the other one is from a therapy and wellness platform in India. Kind of an interesting pairing. But they actually both have some really great insights on how we can support a child's brain while it's developing.
Yeah, and you know what really struck me? How both these sources, they really highlight this almost magical window in early childhood where the brain is just ready to grow and form all these new connections and absorb information. It's incredible.
It's like those early years are like the golden age of neuroplasticity or something. But okay, so before we go too far, can you give us a little refresher on what neuroplasticity actually is and why it's so important?
Absolutely. So, in the simplest terms, neuroplasticity is the brain's ability to rewire itself. And, this happens throughout our whole lives. Just imagine, these neural pathways as trails in a forest, okay? The more you walk on a specific trail, the more defined it becomes. Easy to walk on, right?
Okay, yeah, I get that. So in a young child's brain, those trails are being formed super fast, right? So every little thing, every experience they have is shaping those pathways.
Exactly. And that's what's so exciting. We, as, parents or caregivers or educators, we can have an impact on that. It's not like we're just watching it happen. We're actually helping shape it.
Okay, that's both kind of empowering and a little bit daunting, don't you think? I mean, it makes you realize how important it is that we're really intentional about creating the right environments for these little brains to grow.
For sure. And that's where these articles have some really useful advice. For instance, that school in Indonesia, SPH, they've literally built their whole curriculum around how to foster neuroplasticity.
Oh, wow. So they're actually putting this into practice. How are they doing things differently?
Well, they really push play-based learning. They let kids explore and experiment and problem solve, but it's all in this really stimulating environment. And they make sure there's a lot of physical activity too. So it's not just about sitting at a desk all day. It's about moving around, dancing, getting that blood pumping.
Right. I remember reading somewhere that exercise is like fertilizer for the brain. It helps all those connections get stronger.
That's a great way to put it. And SPH also really encourages creative expression. So things like art, music, storytelling, they get it. A diverse range of experiences helps different parts of the brain get stimulated.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, this other article from the Wellness Hub takes kind of a different angle, right? They're really focused on language development.
Yeah, exactly. They highlight how important it is just to talk to kids, engage them in conversations, read to them from a young age. And they even look at some research on how a child's environment, whether at home or at preschool, plays a huge role in shaping their language skills. It's amazing.
I remember those examples they gave, like Sophia, who grew up bilingual, and Liam, whose language just blossomed in this preschool that was full of singing and stories.
Exactly. Those stories really bring it all to life. It's even those simple things like a lullaby or just telling your kid what you're cooking. It has a huge impact on their brain.
Wow, that's incredible. So it's every interaction, every word matters. It's literally a building block for them.
And what's so fascinating, the Wellness Hub also talked about how this idea goes beyond just spoken language. They said that being exposed to different languages, even dialects, can actually help kids with auditory discrimination and cognitive flexibility.
Oh, that's really interesting. Like giving their brains a workout by hearing different sounds and patterns.
Exactly. The more diverse stuff they're exposed to, the more adaptable their brains become, which, leads to another crucial point they both brought up, how important it is to create an environment where kids feel emotionally secure.
Right, because if a kid's always stressed or anxious, that's going to mess with their ability to learn and explore.
Absolutely. The Wellness Hub, they specifically mentioned how a lack of feeling safe can actually hurt brain development. Their brain can just focus on learning, making those connections.
So creating that nurturing, supportive environment isn't just about making kids feel good. It's actually essential for their brains to develop the right way.
You got it. It's all about building that foundation, that feeling of safety, so their brains can really thrive.
So it sounds like we're saying emotional security, that's like the soil, right? Where all those neural pathways can grow. You gotta have fertile ground if you want something to really take root.
Ooh, I like that analogy. That actually reminds me of something the Indonesian school, SPH, brought up. The importance of having, teachers who are qualified but also really caring. They see the teachers as like key to creating that sense of safety, that emotional safety for the kids.
Right, because when a child feels like they're seen, like somebody gets them, then they're more free to take risks and even make mistakes, right? And that's all part of learning.
Exactly. Which actually brings us to another big thing for, boosting neuroplasticity, encouraging a growth mindset. Both articles talked about how we need to see mistakes not as failures, but as chances to learn and grow.
Yeah. And the Big Life Journal article, they even suggested celebrating mistakes, like giving a high five and saying, woohoo, your brain is growing.
I love that. It's so simple, but it totally changes how you see things. It makes learning fun, creates a good environment for it.
Totally. It's like reframing those failures as brain growth moments, like level up.
Yes, and celebrating mistakes, that's not just for kids, it's for all of us. We gotta be okay with stepping out of our comfort zones, trying new things, even if we mess up sometimes.
Because let's be real, messing up is how we actually learn, right? Pushing past what we already know, being willing to stumble a bit.
100%. Speaking of pushing boundaries, I thought it was so cool how the Big Life Journal asked us to think about our own learning experiences.
Oh yeah, like brainstorming stuff that used to be hard but then got easier with practice.
Yes. It reminds us that neuroplasticity doesn't just stop when we grow up. It's a lifelong thing.
It is. Think about learning to ride a bike. At first it's scary, you're wobbly, but then you practice those pathways and your brain gets stronger, and then boom, you don't even have to think about it.
And think about all the other things you've learned how to do. Drive a car, play an instrument, speak another language. Every single one of those is proof that your brain can change.
It really is amazing when you think about it. Like our brains are shapeshifters or something. They're constantly adapting to what we're experiencing.
That's a great way to put it. And the more we use our brains, the stronger and more flexible they get.
So even though our brains might not be as plastic as they were when we were kids, we can still use that neuroplasticity to keep learning new stuff our whole lives.
Absolutely. And the Wellness Hub, they even talked about some really cool new research that's happening with neuroplasticity. It's pushing the boundaries of what we thought was even possible.
Oh, really? Like what?
Well, they mentioned things like creating learning programs that are tailored to your specific brain. Can you imagine? Education that's designed just for you to work with your unique brain and how you learn best.
Wow. It's like personalized medicine, but for your brain. That's incredible. What else?
They also talked about using virtual experiences, like with augmented reality and virtual reality, to create these super immersive learning environments. Imagine learning a new language by actually being in a market in another country. Virtually, of course.
Or exploring the Amazon rainforest without leaving your house. The possibilities are mind-blowing.
I know, right? And they even talked about brain stimulation techniques that can actually enhance how we learn. These are non-invasive techniques, though, like something called transcranial magnetic stimulation. They can use it to stimulate specific parts of the brain.
It's like giving your brain a little boost, helping those connections fire even better.
Exactly. And while this stuff is still pretty new, there's so much potential for how we can learn in the future. It's exciting.
It really is. I mean, it's amazing how far we've come in understanding the brain and how much it can change.
It is. And, I think it's important to remember that neuroplasticity isn't just about learning facts or getting better at stuff. It also plays a big role in how we feel emotionally.
Right. We talked earlier about how important emotional security is for our brains to develop when we're young. But how does neuroplasticity, affect our emotions as adults?
Well, just like we can get stronger or more skilled by practicing, we can actually train our brains to be more resilient, to handle change better, and even to be more emotionally intelligent.
So we're not stuck with whatever emotional patterns we developed as kids.
Not at all. Our brains are always rewiring themselves based on what we experience, and that includes our emotional experiences.
So, if someone struggles with anxiety, is it possible to retrain their brain to respond differently to stress?
Yes, there are therapies like cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, that are designed to help people rewire their brains and develop healthier patterns for dealing with their emotions.
That's amazing. So it's not like we're just victims of our circumstances or what happened to us in the past. We can actually change our brains and, change our lives.
Exactly. And this idea of taking charge of our own brains, that's really what neuroplasticity is all about.
So as we wrap up this part of our deep dive, what are some of the key takeaways you'd want our listeners to remember about the link between neuroplasticity and how we feel emotionally?
I think the most important thing is that our brains are incredibly adaptable. Even as adults, we have the power to change how we react to things emotionally, to become more resilient, and even become more emotionally intelligent.
And that's not just some feel-good idea. It's backed up by science.
Exactly. And there are lots of practical things we can do to help us on that journey. Things like mindfulness meditation, practicing gratitude, even just spending time in nature. They've all been shown to have a positive impact on our brains and how we feel.
Wow, this is all so fascinating. I'm already feeling inspired to try some of these things myself.
Me too. And that's a perfect lead into the next part of our deep dive, where we'll actually explore some specific activities and exercises that can help boost our neuroplasticity and make us feel better, both mentally and emotionally.
Can't wait. Welcome back to the deep dive. Before the break, we were talking about all the amazing ways our brains can change and adapt. And not just in the way we think, but in how we handle our emotions too.
Yeah, it really is incredible when you stop and think about it. This whole idea that we can actually train our brains to be more resilient, to be like smarter about our feelings, it's pretty empowering.
Absolutely. So let's dive into how we can actually do that. Are there any specific activities or exercises that can help us, boost our neuroplasticity and just feel better overall? I know the Wellness Hub article mentioned a few things.
Oh, they did. And the best part is a lot of these techniques can be helpful for both kids and adults. For example, they talked about the power of interactive read-alouds. Now, for kids, this might involve asking questions about the story or making predictions or even acting out scenes.
And for us grown-ups, it's more about really engaging with what we're reading, not just skimming the words, but actually thinking about the themes, the characters, what the author was trying to say.
Right, you got to make those connections in your brain. Another activity that's awesome for everyone, kids and adults, is music. Whether you're singing, playing an instrument, or just listening, it's like a total brain workout.
I've always loved music, but I never thought about it as a brain health thing. But it makes sense when you realize how many different parts of your brain are working when you listen to music. The rhythm, the melody, the emotions.
Exactly. And there's more and more research showing that music can have a big impact on how well we think, our memory, and even how we regulate our emotions.
I am definitely adding listen to more music to my list. So what else did the Wellness Hub recommend?
Well, for little kids, they emphasized labeling and describing games. It's really simple stuff, like asking a child to name objects around the house or describe their toys. It helps them learn new words, pay attention to details, and it strengthens those brain pathways that are all about language.
And I guess for adults, we can kind of adapt that, right? Making an effort to learn new words or describe things with more detail. It's like a workout for our vocabulary.
Exactly. Another activity that's great for all age is storytelling and role-playing. Kids naturally love making up stories and acting them out. It helps them to get creative and understand other people's feelings.
Right, and for adults, there are so many ways to do this. Joining a writing group, taking an improv class, or even just writing in a journal more often.
Yep. All those activities challenge your brain to think in new ways and be flexible, which is super important for keeping your brain plastic as you get older.
This is awesome. Okay, so we've got interactive read-alouds, music, labeling games, storytelling. What else can we do to boost our brain power?
Oh, there's one more I want to mention. It might seem a little out there, but it's mindfulness meditation. And there's actually growing evidence that practicing mindfulness can actually physically change the brain.
Wait, really? Just by sitting still and paying attention to your breath?
That's what the research is showing. Studies have found that mindfulness meditation can actually increase gray matter in certain parts of the brain, the parts that are linked to learning, memory, and how we process emotions.
Wow, that's wild. It's like a mental workout, but without even moving a muscle.
Ha, exactly. And what's even cooler is that mindfulness has been shown to lower stress, improve focus, and even make you more emotionally intelligent.
So it's a win-win for both our brains and our emotions.
Totally. And I think that's super important to remember. Neuroplasticity isn't just about becoming a genius or learning a million new skills. It's about making our lives better in every way, mentally and emotionally.
Right. It's about the whole package. But before we wrap up, I think we should acknowledge that all this neuroplasticity stuff is not always a walk in the park, right? There could be some bumps in the road.
You're absolutely right. While neuroplasticity is powerful, it's not some magic solution. It takes time, it takes effort, and you got to be consistent if you really want to rewire your brain.
And like we mentioned earlier, age can play a role too. Younger brains tend to be a bit more adaptable. But that doesn't mean older folks should give up. It just might take a little more patience.
Exactly. And the most important thing to remember is that everyone's brain is different. What works for one person might not work for another. So it's really about finding what works for you, the tools and strategies that fit your own learning style and help you along your journey.
That's great advice. So to wrap up this awesome deep dive, what's the one thing you really want our listeners to take away from today's conversation?
I think the biggest takeaway is this. You have more power over your brain than you think. Your brain is constantly changing and adapting based on what you do, what you experience. So, by understanding how neuroplasticity works, you can actually take charge of your own brain, improve how well you think, and create a life that's richer and more meaningful.
That's beautifully put. And I want to thank you for being here with us today and sharing your expertise. This has been such an eye-opening conversation.
The pleasure was all mine. And remember, everyone, your brain is amazing. It's always evolving. Never stop challenging it, exploring it, and taking good care of it. The possibilities are truly endless.
And to our listeners, thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the fascinating world of neuroplasticity. We hope you've learned something new today and feel inspired to unlock the amazing power of your own brain. Until next time, keep those neural pathways firing.